Welcome back to another Investors Therapy session. Today, Julia Arndt joins us to talk about stress, what it is, why we have it, and how we can improve our response to stress so we can make better decisions in our relationships, careers, and investments. Julia worked as a program manager at Google. After leaving the company, she founded Blue Mountain Mindfulness, which is focusing on helping people manage their stress. You can learn more about Julia's work and her stress management classes at bluemountainmindfulness.com. If you aren't a member of Silicon Valley Investors Club, you need to join. Go to svinvestorsclub.com, that's svinvestorsclub.com, where you can join our investment community, which is dedicated to helping current and former tech employees learn about investing. Inside the group, you'll gain access to our group discussions, daily investment articles, free investing tools, and you'll have an opportunity to join us at our in-person meetups. So make sure to head over to svinvestorsclub.com and join our community today. Now let's get to the session. So let's maybe just start with just talking about stress. First of all, it's like, what is stress? That's a first good question for people.
Yeah, definitely. Stress is just, at the end of the day, a response in our body on a physical or psychological demand. So it actually dates back to prehistoric times where our bodies try to protect us of any kinds of demand, right? Stress helped us recognize danger, react quickly, and it helped us survive. So I'm sure that everybody has heard of the fight or flight response. And what happens in our bodies when we're feeling stressed is, obviously, first of all, there's a stress trigger. So could be, having a work deadline, sitting in a traffic jam, being in a conflict with a coworker, and that information is processed by our brain and it activates the so-called sympathetic nervous system. And that is responsible for releasing different types of stress hormones, such as adrenaline and cortisol in our bodies, and how we are feeling that in that kind of quick second, right? Because adrenaline and cortisol can be shot out by our bodies very, very quickly in stressful situations. So we're having increased heart rate, we have tense muscles because we're trying to either fight or run away. And that's basically when the brain senses stress. And what is really important, and I know a lot of people have heard of this before, is that stress can be positive and negative. So you and I wouldn't be sitting here in front of our computers right now if we wouldn't have a natural cortisol increase in the mornings in order to get us going. So stress is, at the end of the day, just information. It's just a way of how our bodies have learned to give us energy during the day. But if we are constantly on high levels of stress, that's of course not very healthy, because what happens when we are exposed all the time to those high levels of stress? Well, it will have physical and mental symptoms or side effects, because our bodies can just not run all of the time on these high stress levels.
So eventually we're going to face burnout because our bodies are built for not like endurance of constantly being under stress 24/7. We're kind of like lions, where we go through long rest periods. We might find game, we go track it down, attack it, take it out, and then go through more rest periods instead of 24/7 being under stress.
Yeah, exactly. It's like the saber-toothed tiger that was chasing us, and we were running away or we were fighting. And then once we did that, we could relax again, right? And we had our rest phases and we could recharge, and the cortisol and adrenaline levels naturally went down. But what is one thing that I always say that is so important for people to know is that our bodies cannot differentiate between a perceived physical and psychological threat. So even though today we are very rarely in that fight or flight mode in the classical sense where a saber-toothed tiger is chasing us down the road, our body doesn't know the difference. So that means that even if we are receiving an email, or if we are receiving a letter, or all these different kinds of things can lead to that stress response. And the easiest thing, if you want to think about it that way, is imagine your manager is sending you an email at 8:00 in the evening saying to you, hey, I want you to set up 30 minutes with me tomorrow morning. I need to talk to you.
Oh
no, it's like, oh no, what do they want? And our brain starts to think, and we all have been in this situation. So we know that thoughts alone can create that stress response. And that is very, very detrimental over a long period of time, right? This doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't happen over a week. But if we are always in that constant stress cycle, then it will start having effects. And for each person, those effects are different. So some might experience it physically, because when we are in the stress response, which is also really, really important to know, is that our main bodily functions, so the immune system, the digestive system, and the cardiovascular system, are slowed down because we are in this fight or flight response. So imagine if your digestive system or if your immune system is constantly suppressed because your body thinks you're in the fight or flight response. Of course, that will have effects. It will have effects on your physical health and oftentimes also mental health, because usually stress is created in our heads, right? Because it's always the question of how do we respond. That's usually just something happens and it's neutral, but it's what we make out of it that creates the stress for us. And we can talk about that.
Yes, continue. That's huge. I was thinking about when we have ambiguity in our lives, going back to the manager wants to have a meeting with us at 8:30 in the morning, we instantaneously just start filling in thought patterns into our assumptions of why this meeting's happening. Oh, I'm in trouble. Oh, I screwed something up. And you're going through this constant hell internally. And then it could turn out the manager's like, hey, I just wanted to give you your stock bonus in the morning and let you know you're getting promoted, and I'll talk to you later. And you're like, oh my God, why did I put myself through that? So let's talk about the mental aspects of stress. How do we make it worse? And then what are some things that we can do to check ourselves to not make the situation any worse?
Well, we all have thoughts, right? We are constantly thinking. And I think there are statistics around that say we have between 70 or 80 to 100,000 thoughts, or 70 to 90,000 thoughts a day. And 7 out of 10 thoughts are negative. So obviously, again, that dates back to prehistoric times. We have a part in our brains that is the so-called reptilian brain. So it's part that's left over from back in the days. And that reptilian brain is always looking for danger. It's always looking for making sure that I survive and I'm protected. So what do? We are always looking for the negative things, or we are always looking for, how can I protect myself? What could be going on? And that starts that negative cycle often. And so mental health is extremely important. And, unfortunately, talking about mental health, I feel like just the term alone still has so much stigma, and it's so sad, because mental health at the end of the day just means it's our psychological and emotional well-being. That's all that mental health says, or it's when you're looking at the definition of mental health, that's what it is. And we all have an emotional well-being, right? We have physical well-being and we have emotional well-being. And so when we are starting to be super stressed out, and it's all kind of intertwined, because when we're having a lot of things going on in our day-to-day lives and we don't have times to recharge, and I'm sure we're going to talk about stress management tools, then we are on this constant higher level of stress response and stress hormone release. And that will bring us more into that cycle. So if you are talking to people that are very stressed out, or if you are seeing a person that is very stressed out, you will see that they might have a shorter fuse. They might be very much more aggressive, because they can't take in anymore as much as they were used to, because they have not had the time to really relax and recharge their batteries.
That's a fantastic point. When you're talking about we have a part in our brain that's constantly looking for potential danger. That same part of our brain works out when we're looking at our investments too. We might constantly be thinking, oh, well, there's an article recently came up about the slowdown in the economy, so it's going to be the end of the world tomorrow. So what I need to do is sell everything or rebalance things in my 401k. And you're constantly just overstimulated by the news. You're looking for the next bad event. And so it causes you to make really bad investment decisions. But you also made a point regarding how we look at our mental health. If someone is under stress, or if someone has a mental disorder, we have like it's a negative it's a stigmatism that you have are having mental stress or mental issues. And it's interesting because if someone's sick, like if someone has a cold or something, or someone has some of their issues, they go to the doctor and get treatment. There's no social stigmatism for that. But for mental health, people don't like to share these things because they don't want people to know that they're having some mental issues, which is sad. So a lot of people are inwardly struggling. And if only people could just have conversations with others and be able to share these feelings, that in itself is part of the cure, to be able to get it off your chest and let other people know that they're dealing with the same issues.
Yeah. And one of the things that I talk a lot about when I'm going into companies and I give stress management trainings is talking about vulnerability, because especially in the work context, we are afraid to show ourselves sometimes, right? Because we don't want our colleagues to know that we have some issues, or maybe that there are some weaknesses within ourselves. So we have really well learned to kind of keep, as you just said, all these things to ourselves. And I'm really teaching about how powerful it can be when you are vulnerable and when you're sharing your story. That's what I did when I went back to work after my, few weeks medical leave in order to recover from burnout. I came back and I actually sent an email internally telling my story and being very vulnerable and saying what had happened to me. And in 2 or 3 days, I had almost 300 replies to that email from all over the world, from people that were connecting with my story. And they said, hey, I've had similar experiences. I would really love to learn how to manage stress better, because it's a real thing. Like, people don't talk about it, but it's a real thing.
Right. And that's super important that you had the courage to be able to share that. And all those people were suffering too. And they see you open up, and now you realize, oh, wait a minute, everyone's going through this. So everyone's struggling with it, but now I've opened up so people can connect with me and we can kind of work together. So let's go into the tools we can use to handle stress. Do you have any suggestions on what we could be doing to make it so that we can analyze our stress and become more effective?
Yeah. So first of all, one of the things that I always say, and that is so important for me, is that stress management is not just about yoga and meditation. I know that nowadays those two tools have they have really skyrocketed in our society. And a lot of people have heard about yoga and meditation. And it is really powerful because yoga and meditation are both working with the breath. And in only 90 seconds, when you're taking a few deep breaths, you can activate the so-called parasympathetic nervous system, which is the counterpart to the sympathetic nervous system. So that's why yoga and meditation are so powerful today and why so many people talk about it. What is important for me, for other people to know, is that that's just two tools of how you can manage your stress. At the end of the day, it depends on what you like to do in order to recharge and in order to relax. And so that could be anything, right? Because everybody is super individual, and stress management tools are really individual, because it depends on what you like to do in order to activate that so-called parasympathetic nervous system, or also called rest and digest or growth and repair state, because we're getting back into all of our bodily functions are working as they're supposed to be working, and we're actually recharging our batteries. So what do you, for example, like to do, Jordan, to manage your stress?
That's a really good question. and what I wanted to talk to you about was also, I want to say I agree with everything you said there, because I was lucky to be exposed to meditation back in, I think it was like 2010 or so. I had a mentor who taught me to meditate, because he learned how to meditate, not because he wanted to go to a meditation retreat, was that he was in so many bad corporate meetings. He wanted to learn how to zone out.
Interesting.
And so he learned meditation. That's what kept him sane in corporate America. But for me, I was doing meditation pretty regularly. And I look at meditation, yoga, journaling, all in this branch of mindfulness, where what you're trying to do is just give yourself some time to kind of like analyze your thoughts, or like not think. And what people can get themselves kind of screwed up with is they want like a Bible to tell them what exactly should I do to get mindfulness.
Exactly.
And then it becomes very ritualistic, where they'll say, well, some guru master told me that I need to first pay $10,000 for their course. I need to put on yoga pants and do yoga for 10 hours a day, and I'll get Zen, followed by eating 10 pounds of kale. And they're like, oh no, I didn't eat 10 pounds of kale today. And I've been doing this for 3 weeks straight. So that means I'm not going to be mindful and be stressful. The whole entire concept of them doing those rituals actually causes more stress in their lives than anything else. So I think with like spirituality or religion, it's a very personal thing between you and the creator or you and science. And so for me, I try to stress people, like, find your own way that works for you. But a couple things I do is I have the 5-minute journal. I try to do that every morning. Just write about things I'm happy for, things that I've been reflecting on, just talk about things I want to accomplish. That's one thing. Another thing that I like to do is I like to do meditation like every now and then, but I'm not doing as much as I used to. And a third thing is I have I call it a mindfulness journal, where if I'm in a situation where I have stress and there's ambiguity, I have the spreadsheet where I write down what the situation is causing stress. And then I write down, what do I think is going to happen when this ambiguity disappears? So going back to the boss example, I'd say, okay, I'm under stress because my boss wants me to meet at 8:30. What do I think is going to happen? Oh, I'm going to get terminated. Oh, they figured out that my email writing is terrible, so they're going to fire me, all these things. Then when the event happens, I write down what actually did happen. And it turns out, oh, I got promoted. Then I reflect and say, okay, wait a minute. What is the difference between what I thought was going to happen and what really happened? And what did I insert in there that was negative? Oh, I was being a negative Nelly. So after doing this a couple times, you start having data on yourself. And when you get into your next ambiguous situation, you're able to say, oh, wait a minute, instead of me becoming a negative Nelly, I've noticed the last 9 times I've done this, maybe there's a different way for me to look at that. And by just doing that, that gives me some space between my thoughts and allows me to be more mindful and less stressed.
Amazing. That's great that you're doing that.
Thank you.
That's a really great tool.
How about yourself? I want to hear about some of your techniques.
Yeah. So I personally, I do 2 things, right? I think we have to look at the personal side, but I also think we have to look at the work side. I want to talk about both, but from a personal perspective, I love to go on walks. I really like to be active. I have a dog, and so she's always a really good reason why I should be going outside. And I can tell, of course, nowadays I'm very aware of my own stress level. So I can tell when I'm starting to jump between my different email tabs and I'm jumping between my computer and my phone. And I know, hey, I'm not as focused and productive as I want to be. So it probably means that my body is a little bit in overload and I need to relax and I need to recharge. So that's when I take my dog and I go for walks. Obviously, I live in the beautiful mountains of Lake Tahoe, so I have, a beautiful backyard.
Your life is very tough. I understand. I go home at night and I pray for you. I'm like, oh, it must be so hard for her in Tahoe. It's so tough. Go for it.
It is a beautiful place to live here. Yeah. And so I do that a lot. I love to be active. I'm a very active person. So I love to go for walks, but also go to the gym, go for runs, go for bike rides, all the active things. That's very good as well to get your parasympathetic and nervous system activated. I also journal. I think that's really important. It's become a really, really important part of my life. And it's especially when you have a lot of thoughts on your mind all the time, I think it's a really powerful tool to write it down and let it go, because you kind of tell someone what's going on, right? I do have a morning routine as well. I talk a lot about that as a really powerful tool in stress management, because what I do when I wake up in the morning is I'm not checking my phone first thing anymore, which I'm sure probably still 95% of people, if not more, do that.
Guilty as charged.
And, I have really learned that no matter if I check my phone at 7 when I get up or at 8 when I have actually done my own morning routine, people will be okay to wait another hour and nothing bad is going to happen in that hour, but you have recharged and you have really internally started your day in a really meaningful, mindful way, instead of just kind of going into that red race and starting with all the crazy emails and all these different things right away. And so your stress level is right up here, right? Because you're like, oh, seeing this email or something sent me something that might trigger a couple of negative thoughts, and right away you're in that stress response.
That's a very good point, because you want to be able to start your mornings in control, at least, where you're paying yourself first about taking care of your own physical health by working out, or mental health by meditating and journaling. Because a lot of people don't do that, and they're immediately like I said, sometimes you pick up your phone and you're immediately just thinking about what someone else needs you to do, or their negative thoughts get in your mind, and it feels that you're already under the gun. So that's a
Exactly.
very good point to raise.
Yeah, it's super important. And it's made a huge difference for me. I set my phone actually to airplane mode. So I can still use my alarm. I can still look at my phone, but there's nothing new on there, which I think, we all have that slight addiction to like check our phones and check our screens in the morning. But there's just nothing there. And that's kind of a calming feeling as well. And I've told a lot of people this specific tool, and a lot of people come back to me and say, wow, this is so powerful.
Do you set your alarms with your cell phone, or do you have a separate clock for your alarms?
I honestly, and I know you want to talk a little bit about sleep today as well, I go to bed really early and I don't have an alarm clock.
What?
I wake up.
That's amazing.
I wake up when I go to bed. I obviously have meetings all the time as well in the mornings, but I know that I usually wake up between 6:30 and 7. I also have my fiance. He wakes up very early in the morning. So he's kind of my natural, he's kind of my natural alarm clock. Or I tell him, hey, like I need to get up at 7. Can you wake me up at the time, which is great.
That's a good
because
tip.
it's a softer way to wake up in the morning than by an alarm clock. Excellent. But of course, not everybody can do that.
Right.
But yeah, let's talk about sleep if that's okay.
Yeah, of course. Let's go into it.
We're talking about that. Sleep is incredibly important for stress management and for our own well-being. And I'm sure people have heard about how important it is. A couple of thoughts. First of all, we are adults, and I feel like we have kind of learned that there's a certain time in the evening before we shouldn't go to bed. So we're like, oh, I'm an adult. I shouldn't go to bed before 10 o'clock because that's just what I've always been doing. And I've talked a lot with people about this, and it always makes me smile because I'm like, doesn't matter. Hey, if your body is telling you that you're super tired, just go to bed. Don't just sit in front of the TV and try to force yourself to be up for another hour or two just because the clock doesn't show 10 o'clock yet. So that's been really powerful for a lot of my clients as well, to actually find consistent bedtimes and morning times and get the 7, 8, 9 hours of sleep in that you really need in order to recharge, in order for all of your processes internally to be reset. I know that a lot of people also have trouble falling asleep or sleeping in general. Maybe they wake up in the middle of the night with a racing head, with all the thoughts and all the things that they need to get done by. And what I really recommend there is actually breathing techniques or listening to something that is calming your system to distract your thoughts. I have had trouble falling asleep. I still have it from time to time, of course, because our life is going through ups and downs. And doing a breathing technique, doing kind of a full body relaxation, a guided one that you can nowadays find on any, Calm app or Headspace app or all these different kinds of amazing apps, is really powerful and really help us to kind of fall asleep and stay asleep as well, or get back to sleep quickly if we're waking up in the middle of the night.
That makes sense. Another thing I like to do is, if I don't get my full 8 hours of sleep, if I had to sometimes only go 5 or 6 hours of sleep, which is terrible, and I do not recommend anyone does it, but sometimes you have an early meeting and life just happens, I will tell myself in the morning, I have gotten less sleep than necessary. I should not do any deep thinking. I should not make any deep life decisions because I'm emotional right now. And I find that when people are under stress, they're like, okay, you know what I should do? I should do a radical change. I should completely just quit my job or tell someone to go jump in a lake or go to Tahiti or something. And for some people that might work, but sometimes there could be a better answer to what you're doing right now. If you just had time to get an 8-hour rest of sleep, give yourself the weekend to think about what you're going to do and make a gradual change to your life instead of trying to make that immediate change off of sleep deprivation. Another thing is, I think you mentioned Carl Jung in one of your YouTube videos, and he's really big into dream analysis. There's a big movement about lucid dreaming, which talks about how you're able to kind of look at your dreams and maybe manipulate them or get some type of realization from them. And research studies have shown that veterans who are coming back from war zones suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, they've been able to use their sleep and analyze their dreams as a way to kind of recuperate to a degree. So I found myself that when I'm able to get a full 8 hours of sleep, sometimes I'm able to have a dream where if I was thinking about something before I went to sleep, my dream would kind of bring it up and I'd be able to reflect on things, which would kind of serve as a restorative way for myself, my own emotional well-being. So yeah, I think sleep is super duper important. What about, I want to talk about going back to stress, and it seems like stress and excitement actually activates like similar pathways into our brain. So it's like really, really close. So sometimes maybe you might be under stress, but the way you look at it, it could actually be a degree of excitement, or there could be a new experience that you haven't gone through before. So you're feeling stress. Are there ways to kind of reframe the stress that we're feeling to make it more positive instead of just looking at it more of a negative that we should avoid?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's my main mission and message, that you need to use, or you need to learn how to use stress to your advantage instead of seeing it as a disadvantage, right? So stress is really just information. It's about like, hey, something is happening, and it goes back as well to triggers, right? It goes back to even childhood experiences and things that you have maybe learned in a certain way, and that then trigger something within you that stresses you or that brings up a negative emotion. That's why I always say there's kind of 3 parts about stress management. There are the short-term management tools. We just talked about those. Then there are the kind of the middle term stress management tools, which are more work related for me, at least in my business, because I'm working with corporations, with employees, with tech companies, consultants, VCers, and we really look at how to manage your time, how to set boundaries, because we haven't learned that. Like, let's be honest, we haven't really learned how to really be good about managing our own time, managing our calendars, how to set boundaries and actually say no to people. So we'll talk about that.
Yeah. I was going to say where are the common mistakes people run into, but we go ahead and continue.
Cool. But yeah, and then the third bucket is the long-term stress management tools, which are the hardest ones to get into, but those are the ones that are around limiting beliefs, right? Like triggers. What is actually coming up? Why are you triggered in the first place? When you have your manager sending you an email at 8 p.m. in the evening telling you, hey, I need to talk to you. And then in the morning, you actually find out that he just wanted to tell you that you've been promoted, or he wants to tell you, here's your salary package for 2020. And so what is coming up? There's a fear, and usually that fear is connected to a negative experience in the past. And so looking at these triggers is really, really important, because what I always say is, if you can work on the short-term stress management tools, right? You can be really good at implementing those into your day-to-day. But if your stress trigger is coming back up, then you will always have to manage your stress again. So we need to go kind of to the source and look at why are you stressed in the first place. But that's a really long explanation and a really long answer to, yes, we can use stress to our advantage. Okay. Because if we are aware of the patterns, if we are aware of, hey, okay, now I am more aware of what my own early warning signals are when I'm starting to be stressed and when I have too much cortisol and adrenaline in my body. And I'm just going to be really smart now, because I'm going to take a break for 10 minutes and disconnect in order to recharge and then get back to work and be more focused, be more productive, that I can use that to my advantage. It's really, really important to understand that. And one of the things that I really like is the 10% most productive employees in a company take on average 52 minutes to work, and then they take a 17-minute long break. 17 minutes, it's a long time. And if people are listening now and they're really good at math, they know that it's around 30% of their day-to-day that they actually spend on breaks. But those are the 10% most productive employees. What have they learned? They have learned to manage their stress in a really, really positive way and to use it to their advantage, that when they know, hey, now I need a break and I need to recharge because I just can't focus anymore, they will actually do it. They will actually disconnect, have some water, walk around, have a snack, and then get back to work. And we can all learn that. But, the greatest gap in life is between knowing and doing.
Right.
And we all know a lot of these things, but we don't do them. And so that makes really the difference between high performers and high achievers and people that want to be there, but they're not there because they just haven't learned these specific tools.
A lot of great points I was writing down on my notepad. It sounded like you were talking about the law of diminishing returns. We focus on that for work, where you always hear about venture capitalists or investment bankers. Oh, I work 120 hours, blah, blah, blah. It's like, no. You might be able to work 60, 70 hours, but then after a certain threshold, every additional minute you put into work, the output you're getting is nothing compared to the original 40, 50, or 60 you're giving.
Yeah.
And the same thing could be for our mental health. We got to be able to realize, okay, I can give concentrated focus for a certain amount of time, but I need to give my mind space to actually recharge. But then what's important is we think that by resting and recharging or wasting time, our brains are still working in the background. They're making connections, they're analyzing things, thinking of stuff. And that's why when people come back from a 2-week vacation, they come back with even better ideas and they're more productive employees. So that makes a lot of sense. I want to talk about finding triggers. Like, what are good ways for us to be able to determine like what our common triggers are? Like, you have certain techniques people can use to start understanding more about themselves?
Yeah. I have people think about what they spend a lot of time thinking about. That's a very right. Because when we have these negative cycles in our head, it's usually around a certain topic. So that's kind of the first information that we can have, right? It's, for example, I'm always afraid that somebody's going behind my back, or I'm afraid that somebody's talking negatively about me, or I'm afraid that I'm not good enough because maybe people don't think I'm performing enough. All these different kind of things, right? Like, where do our thoughts circle around over and over and over again? That's a very good information to have. And then once you know that, I always challenge my clients and the participants of my trainings on, where does that come from? And I'm going to give you a specific example because I just had a really beautiful example yesterday working with a client one-on-one. And we were talking about giving and receiving feedback. And she said to me in the beginning, the very first time I talked to her, she said, I'm a very indirect person. I don't like direct feedback. And I also have trouble giving and receiving feedback. And so I asked her yesterday, we talked about this more. And I asked her, where does that come from? Okay, so she said to me, I have this like really weird gut feeling when somebody's giving me direct feedback and it's like immediately triggering me. And I'm like, okay. And so I said to her, where does that come from? Did you have an experience in the past where something negative happened to you, and that's why now you have this strong emotional response to it? And she thought about it and she said, the only reason that I can think back to of how I'm kind of connecting these 2 points is, she's like, I'm an athlete and I love to work out, and in sports, I never wanted to fail. Like, giving up or failing was not an option. And she's like, so every time somebody didn't make me team captain, it was like a negative feedback of like, I was a failure. Like, she saw herself as a failure. And she's like, so what I am combining is that negative feedback said to me basically that I'm a failure. And I'm like, oh, that's so powerful, because now you know that when people give you feedback, that is the emotion that's coming up. You think that they tell you that you're a failure, even though they just want to help you grow. They just want to show you something that's maybe a blind spot of yours. So you see how we can all of a sudden kind of turn this around and use that again to our advantage, that information. Hey, okay, obviously every time we're giving or receiving feedback, we're not trying to tell people that they're a failure, or right. People are not trying to tell us that we are a failure, but now we know, okay, this is the fear that came up from my negative experience or from my fear when I was a child. And now I can use that and tell myself, hey, next time this feeling is coming up, I remember that. I'm aware, right? Awareness is always the most important step in order to make a change in your life. And once you know that, then you can work with that and be like, hey, reminder, this is a fear from the past. This has nothing to do with this experience that you're finding yourself in right now. And you can react in a very different way to that then. Because she said, yeah, I feel like I usually get a little bit aggressive. And when people give me direct feedback because I feel like I'm threatened. And now she knows where that comes from and can work with it in order to be more powerful at the end of the day.
That's huge. She probably should have gave you $100,000 right there for that. That's because I think one issue we run into is we're all in our own little worlds. And we think we're the center of all society. And so when someone says something to us or does something to us, we immediately say, okay, we have to put this in context of our world. So this feedback immediately, this person's saying I'm a failure. And we're not putting into context of like, no, what is that person trying to get across? Maybe they're thinking something completely different from us. So we take our assumptions for granted and mean gospel truth. I also think about that, as humans, we try to look at ourselves like, we're different than animals. We set ourselves apart. But what was really interesting is I have a lab. Her name's Daisy, and she was a rescue. And we got her when she's really young, and she's adorable. And anytime I would turn the sprinkler on the water on, she would droop her ears and run and tuck tail. And I learned that it was because the person that they rescued the dog from would terrorize her with a hose and shoot her and get her wet and make her feel really terrified. She's now like 10 years old, and it's gotten to the point where now she's a little bit better, but she still has that initial fear. A lot of us think that we are all 100% completely rational, but some of our trigger points are due to how we were raised and our upbringing that are still there, but we've figured out a way to use our highbrow intellect to mask them with these highfalutin excuses. So that's why I really believe in, like, you ignore what people say, you focus more on what they do, because that really tells you what the story is. And I am someone who has a below average IQ, I believe, but they have found out that people who have high IQs are very good at tricking themselves into giving a much more complex reason why they're under stress or why they get triggered, when a lot of this can come down to just their early development or their childhood.
It does.
So what I want to go into next is, you have this concept called toxic goals that can cause stress. Can we talk about that, please?
Yeah, of course. So it's not my concept. I wish it would be mine.
I'm gonna get today. It's your show. I'm giving it to you. Okay, take it.
Okay. So I do want to give credit. It's a really good friend of mine. His name is Ryan Munsey. He's an author of a book that's called F Your Feelings, and we talked about toxic goals in one of a podcast interview that I did with him. And what he defines as a toxic goal is goals that we have where we either compare, compete, or copy other people's goals, but they're not really our goals. And I thought that concept so powerful and so interesting. And I'm sure that's why you're asking this question as well, because we have so often goals in our lives, especially when we're looking at the corporate world and being in that rat race or in that hamster wheel of, I need to get into the next promotion. I need to get to the next level. I want to have a higher pay raise. I want to have a higher salary, more stocks, all these different things. And very often when I speak with clients and when I speak with people that are attending my trainings, we talk about values and we talk about what their values are. And very often when we're bringing it back to their own values, they realize, hey, I have adopted something from someone else because I was in that environment, or I had a lot of people around me that had that goal, but it's actually not mine. And like, having that realization and bringing it back to what you really need and what you really want is really powerful, in order also to decrease stress, of course, but also to understand what you really want in your life and what is really important in your life. And I to give an example for that as well, because I think it's really, really important, is I'm working with executive clients, high-level, managers at different tech companies, and we talk about values, especially there, because they have already made it to a very high level, but they still feel burnt out, and they sometimes are even on antidepressants or already on some kind of medical medication for mental health or mental illness, and they put themselves under a lot of pressure, and also they have very high stress levels, and they have not really learned how to deal with it, right? Unfortunately, they're dealing with it by taking a pill. which for me as a non-American, for me it's very powerful and very shocking, because I come from Germany originally. We have a little bit of a different, a different culture, I guess, when it comes to medication. But seeing for me people that medicate themselves to feel better, but not actually doing something about what the underlying issue is, what the actual symptom is not the right way, I believe, to do. So what I really do with those people is to look at, okay, where does the stress come from? And one of the stressors that he had, and I'm thinking about a client again of mine, is that he really felt undervalued. He didn't feel recognized. And that caused a lot of stress, because he was the sole provider of his family and 3 kids. And so we talked about that.
Sorry, what he wanted, like, strokes to approval from who? Was it from his family? Was it from the company?
From the company.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, from the company. Because he put all these hours in, right? Like that's kind of that cycle, right? He puts all these hours in, and he feels like he's constantly delivering, constantly performing, but he had his first performance evaluation, and the performance evaluation wasn't very positive. So all of a sudden, here they are, all the negative thoughts and all those questions around, am I not good enough? Why am I not being recognized for all this hard work that I'm doing? And so we looked at his values, and his values said very clearly, the most important thing in my life is actually my family, and how I'm currently showing up for them is, like, it doesn't, like, when somebody looks at my life right now, it doesn't reflect on what my 5 top values say on paper. Mm-hmm. And so with that realization, and sometimes that's all it is, we just need to create awareness around certain things. With that realization, he went into work with a very different mindset and with very different expectations. And over the last 6 months has made incredible progress at work, because he just took that pressure off of work. At the end of the day, we are all high performers. We have learned how to always deliver and how to do our work. But the question is, how do we, how do we create, how do we use that? How do we use that to our advantage? And we haven't learned to use that to our advantage. We use it to our disadvantage, because every time we are doing something that we think is not good enough, we beat ourselves up for it.
Right.
Right. And so, so he took a step back just mentally from putting pressure on himself. He still delivered very well at work, but he put more focus on his family. And I have multiple stories like that with my clients. And all of a sudden, work goes super well. Yeah. Because they just take that pressure off, and that mental pressure that we create all the time on ourselves.
Right. It's a really good point. Regarding mental health and medication and whatnot, there are people who you need to have medication because there's some things that are just genetic and imbalances that need to be taken care of, and it's completely fine they do that. But then there are other people where there are root problems that they're not really addressing, and they're using the medication kind of as a crutch, which can become completely negative and not good for you. And so with the person you're talking about, I think a lot of it comes down to too is, if you go to any corporation, every department says, we are not getting appreciated enough by the CEO. And then the CEO is like, I try to appreciate everyone, or she's like, I appreciate everyone, but when I do appreciate everyone, then everyone starts thinking, oh, well, you're just saying that. Or then there's a thought in the back of their mind, if I start appreciating people too much, they're going to come to me for a next performance evaluation and say, well, you appreciate me, can I get a promotion now? So it's a really, really interesting double bind. And so what I've been trying to focus on myself is appreciate myself for what I'm doing, and don't look for appreciation of others. Actually be the person who goes out there and appreciates others more. And most people are focusing more on receiving appreciation, and by the fact that you're appreciating others, it's kind of it's refreshing in a sense. And then you also don't need people's strokes. So it's like, oh, I'm not getting stroked by someone, they're not appreciating me, that's fine, I'm going to continue doing my thing. But with that executive, I think through your counseling, they started realizing, like, hey, the family aspect is the most important thing. I mean, work comes and goes, but this family thing is the only pure relationship I'm going to have in my life, and so I need to make sure I'm focusing on it. So
and I'm not counseling. I just want to be sure, like, I'm not a therapist, right? Like, I'm just a coach, and we're just kind of uncovering certain things in their life that are happening. And one of the things that you said that I think is really powerful is one of the stress management tools actually is to look at your effort versus the results.
Mm-hmm.
Because we can't really influence the result. We can only influence how much we put in, and we can always measure our success really by our own effort. And if you ask yourself the question, hey, have I done enough? Have I done everything in my power that I can do in order to deliver a great project or do something really good for my family and friends? And the answer is yes, then this is your response, and this is then your own appreciation should come through, instead of waiting to see if somebody reacts to it, right? That reaction or that result, that is very, very important difference.
That's so true. And I think social media set up that we put something out there and we're like waiting, okay, someone gonna like it, someone gonna like
exactly.
it.
Yeah.
They liked it, great. Oh, they don't like it, delete. Naval Ravikant, who's an angel investor, says you should be impatient with action and patient with results. And that applies to careers, that applies to private equity side hustles, and also applies to investments. Now, when we were talking about toxic goals, I think another aspect is grass is always greener syndrome that we do to ourselves, where we say, okay, I'm under stress right now, but I know if I had a different job, or if I know if I had X, Y, and Z conditions, my life would be so much better. But just by having those thoughts, you're kind of giving your mind an escape hatch where you're not actually focusing your energy on what you need to analyze now that's causing stress in your life. By having those fantasies, you kind of create more stress for yourself in a sense. Now, with your clients you've worked with, do some of them talk about financial stress of just having to balance their finances or having aspirations that they're not currently hitting?
Interesting.
Do you have any conversations about that?
No, I don't. I did do one time a podcast episode about financial stress, because I do know that people have financial stress, and I actually love finances. I think it's very fascinating. And I did a podcast episode on it, I remember, and that was like one of my first episodes, I think. And I talked about how important it is to manage your finances. A lot of people are afraid of finances or worried and stressed because they have unrealistic expectations, or they don't know what's going on. They haven't looked at their finances forever and ever because it's too scary to look at my credit cards bill and look at how much debt I have and all these different things. So what I say to people always is, fear creates stress, right? That's super basic. And if you don't know what's going on in certain ways, but you should be looking at something, that can create a lot of stress. So what I tell people is, start having a financial plan. Start going through your credit card statements and organize them by category. That's what I do, of where do I spend my money, and maybe where do I pay for a subscription that I don't even need anymore. But if I don't look at these things, I can't do it, and then that creates fear and that creates stress. So I think when it comes to finances, and I don't know, I would love to hear your opinion on that as well, but when it comes to finances, at least from my perspective, because I'm not an investor, it's just like managing my finances on a day-to-day and month-to-month basis. It's all about control and just being very mindful about regularly checking in and looking at how much money have I made and how much money have I spent. And is there actually a negative, or is there a positive? And I think it's all about education and being aware of what's going on, instead of just always shoveling it under the table and being like, oh no, this is kind of uncomfortable to look at. I'd rather not.
Right. And I think that's super important. That's one of the core tenets of just financial planning, is just being aware of what's going on with your finances.
Yeah.
And also, I mean, just being able to say, okay, this investment I'm looking at is not doing well, or maybe I have a lot of debt, but to realize it is there, and by you ignoring it, it's not going to change the situation. I think it's going to make it worse. So that's very important. I find people, I look at it as a spectrum. There's some people who are just completely disengaged from finances. They have no idea what their stock is doing. They have no idea like how much they're saving or spending. They don't know how a credit card works. And then there's some people who are hyper engaged with their finances, where it's like every day they go onto mint.com and they check their net worth, or they're constantly looking at individual stocks. to the point that it creates more stress in their lives because their net worth is not growing quick enough compared to people relative in their peer group. And what's funny is if you're a tech employee, you already are a 1%er just by the fact you work at a tech company. It doesn't matter what you do in a tech company, you're a 1%er because you're getting stock that's valued pretty well. But because we value our own self-worth on our peer group, we will say, oh, well, someone has more wealth than I do, so I'm not doing so well, so I'm stressed out about this, I need to work harder. Whereas we take a couple steps back and we look at the grand scheme of things of everyone in America or everyone in Europe, and you realize, oh, wait a minute, I'm already a 1%er, so why am I worrying about this? So being able to take a step back. So I think there's always a happy medium involved on how engaged you are with your finances. You don't want to be, I'm going to take my hands off the wheel and hopefully Jesus will take care of it. And you also don't want to be the person who, when they go to bed at night and they kiss their wife or husband goodnight, they have a spreadsheet showing your finances. You want to find some type of happy medium there that reduces your stress.
Absolutely.
I think this is a good segue actually into 3 book recommendations that I do at the end of each show. So what is one book you have read that has made you better at handling stress?
Honestly, I think it's the book from Joe Dispenza called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself, because that looks more at the deeper rooted, what we talked about, like issues and negative experiences that come maybe from childhood and how you can reprogram your mind. I love all of the neuroscientific research that he has done on our brain functionality. I think it's so powerful. He talks about brain waves and how brain waves are connected when we sleep, how brain waves are connected when we meditate. But, obviously he has that meditation aspect at the end of the book, but the beginning of the book is all about where does stress come from and how have we wired our brain to have these unhealthy patterns and unhealthy habits, and how can we unwire it. And I thought, I love this book. I have read it multiple times. I do still read it, like every time sometimes if I can't sleep, I literally listen to the audiobook. I think it's a really, really good book to read.
You raise a great point. Sometimes when we look at books, we look at them as something to be checked off on our to-do list, and then we never look at it again. But when you come across a great book like that, you should read it multiple times, because each time you read it, you're going to pick up something new. And then also you're a different person. It's like handing someone a copy of Great Gatsby or Moby Dick when they're 10 years old, and then having them read it when they're 20 and 30 and 40. Each time you read it, you pick up something new and it makes you a better person. So thank you for that recommendation. I think it's fantastic. What is one book you have read that has made you a better thinker? For instance, a book that helped you think clearer or provide you with tools to conquer your mind.
Yeah, great question. And the book that I want to mention here as well is also a little bit more on the spiritual side, but I really, really love this book. And it's also a book that I listen to over and over and over again. And it's called The 4 Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz.
Great book.
And he has 4 agreements to live your life by, and they are so true and so omnipresent, and they are be impeccable with your word, don't take things personally, don't make assumptions, and always do your best. And I really believe that if you practice these on a regular basis, you will have a very happy and not stress-free life. I don't say stress-free because we always have stress. It's a natural response. So I don't like when people say anti-stress or stress-free, because that doesn't exist. But we can have a really beautiful life that has a perfect balance of positive stress and not negative stress. I
think it's an excellent recommendation. I also love that book. It's also only 3 hours long, an audiobook, but it's going to be the most impactful 3 hours you're ever going to listen to in your life. The agreement of don't take things personally is huge, because we're constantly, anything that happens in our life, it could be a random freak thing, and we'll say, oh, the reason why that thing happened is because someone hates me. And being able to take distance from those things that happen in your life and not put so much importance upon them allows you to think a bit clearer and make better decisions. So that's fantastic.
I love that one, but I do have to say as well, I love the don't make assumptions one.
Yes.
Because especially when we are in family context or friends context, we think people know us, right? And you talked about this so beautifully at the beginning of the podcast, that we think that we are the center of the universe and that people should know us, and especially our friends and our partners should know us. But we should never make assumptions. We should never think that they would think that they know everything, because they don't. So we have to communicate, and it's really, really important to say what's going on instead of assuming that they just know.
That definitely is true. We're cognitive misers, and we just like to save our mental resources. So we'll just assume someone knows exactly what I want when they probably don't even know what they want in their lives. Mm-hmm. So for the third book, what is one book you have read that has made you a better person? For instance, a book that has provided you with a new way to look at the world, help you see things differently in your life, or taught you about a certain aspect of history?
Mm-hmm. It's going to be The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle.
Great book too, yes.
Also a book that I always listen to on a consistent basis, because it's such a powerful reminder to live in the present moment. We create a lot of stress because of things that happened in the past and that we pull back into the present moment, or because of things that are in the future and we cannot control them. We don't know what's going to happen, and they stress us as well. So always kind of bringing it back to the present moment is so powerful, and it's really that book has changed my life 100%.
Completely true. I read that book a couple times. He came to our office to give a talk. He's just an excellent speaker, and I think I try to break the way, like the way I think of myself. I try to think of myself as three people. There's the past self, past Jordan, there's a current Jordan, there's a future Jordan. And I find out that sometimes people who are, or when I get sad or depressed, I might be focusing too much on the past Jordan. Mm-hmm. When I get anxious or nervous, I may be focusing too much on the future Jordan that don't even know what's going to happen. And then there's a present Jordan where I just focus on what's happening right now. I'll feel much better. Mm-hmm. But then on the contrary, if we focus too much on now and having a really good time and don't plan for the future, then eventually my future self won't be good. But I think in our lives, most of us are focusing way too much in the future. We're thinking about all these different situations that could possibly happen in our life that don't happen. I think Mark Twain said, as an old man, I lived through a lot of terrible things, and most of them didn't happen. And it's just so incredibly true, because we're constantly thinking about
it is so incredibly true.
Yeah. So we're always thinking about what could go wrong. So excellent book recommendations. Julia, thank you so much for joining us. This has been fantastic. Really appreciate it. Thank you. And where can we find you? What's your website? What's your Twitter?
Yeah. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me, Jordan, and inviting me. I hope this is really helpful for a lot of people. I do have a podcast. I mentioned it already a few times. It's by my name, Julia Arndt, and it's called Stressed, Develop Your Stress Resilience. And I also have a YouTube channel that's called Julia Arndt. And every week I post a weekly podcast on there and one video per week that talks about a stress management tool. So those are the two kind of things where people can find more information. And then I have Instagram. My Instagram handle is @BlueMountainMindfulness, and my website is bluemountainmindfulness.com.
Okay, fantastic. Hey, investors. I hope you enjoyed this Investors Therapy session. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. And we'd really appreciate it if you could share it with your friends. Finally, make sure to visit svinvestorsclub.com. There you will find tons of great investor content. And if you're a current or former tech employee, you can join our private community dedicated to helping tech employees become better investors. All of this is free, so make sure to take advantage of it. Have a great day. See you next time.